Right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on our weekly Friday Lunch and Learns. Every Friday at noon, we go live with an environmentally focused topic. And today we are going to be getting an update from Wally Taylor about Duane Arnold and kind of what's going on with the Iowa Utilities Commission. And so with that, I will hand it over to you, Wally, and we'll get the screen.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've been talking for some time now, and as we all know, about the proposal by NextEra Energy to restart the Duane Arnold nuclear plant that has been shut down since 2020 and put in decommissioning status. So what NextEra proposes to do is to restart the Duane Arnold. So let's go to the next slide. Hopefully, there we go. And there are a number of steps that NextEra needs to take in order to restart Duane Arnold. They need to get several license amendments and other decisions from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They need to get rezoning from the Lynn County Board of Supervisors. But they also need to get a permit from the Iowa Utilities Commission because, or the IUC, I will call it, because anytime a electric generating facility either comes online or in this case restarts, they need a permit from the IUC. And that permit is dictated by the provisions of Chapter 476A of the Iowa Code. So let's go to the next slide. In order for the NextEra to obtain a permit, Iowa law requires that the Utilities Commission find that the restarting Duane Arnold would be consistent with legislative intent. Now, the legislative intent you can find in several sections of the code, and I've listed here the 4 general areas that an NextEra would have to satisfy in order to be consistent with legislative intent. They have to provide a sufficient quantity of reliable electric service to Iowa consumers. They have to provide economic benefits to the state. They have to provide electric generation compatible with environmental policies of the state and encourage the development of renewable electric power generation. And if you dig into this, restarting Duane Arnold does not comply with that legislative intent. So let's go to the next slide. First of all, Duane Arnold would not provide electric service to Iowa consumers. The power from Duane Arnold would primarily power data centers owned by Google. Google proposes to build 6 new data centers near the Duane Arnold plant. And Google has what's called a power purchase agreement with Duane Arnold, that Duane Arnold would simply provide power to Google and no one else. Although a small portion of the power would be purchased by Central Iowa Power Cooperative, which is a rural electric cooperative, and that would serve the Power Cooperative's members. Before Duane Arnold shut down, Central Iowa Power Cooperative and another a cooperative, Corn Belt, owned like about 30%, I think, total of Duane Arnold. So Central Iowa Power Cooperative and Corn Belt have sold their interests to Next Era. And so Central Iowa Power would then just purchase some of the power from Duane Arnold if it's restarted. But this would be a very small segment of Iowa consumers, and that would not be sufficient to satisfy legislative intent if you really look at what the legislature intended to benefit all Iowa consumers. Overall, there will be no economic benefits to the state. That's the second thing that the Next Era would have to show. Although there may be some short-term economic benefits, there are long-term costs and adverse impacts. What Next Era is doing is hiring a firm to do an economic analysis. But how they do this is they use a model, an economic model called IMPLAN, which makes a lot of assumptions. They get those assumptions and other information from Duane Arnold, not, I'm sorry, from Next Era, not from any independent source. And then they only look at the benefits. They don't look at the costs and adverse impacts. And really, to do a valid economic analysis, you have to look at the cost benefit ratio. And we've been through this before with other projects, for example, the carbon dioxide pipelines. And there are a lot of long-term costs and adverse impacts that really should be considered if you want to do an accurate economic analysis. And that is not what Next Era is doing, and that's not what they're presenting to the IUC. So let's go to the next slide. The next area of inquiry is the environmental policies of the state, which are established to protect Iowa's land, air, and water. Nuclear power is not renewable. We want to encourage renewable energy. Nuclear power uses uranium for fuel, which is a finite resource mined from the ground, just like coal, gas, or oil. So it's not renewable. Uranium is going to run out. So to say that the nuclear power is renewable is a false assumption. And nuclear power is not clean. This is the really false narrative that the nuclear industry is pushing. They're saying nuclear power is clean because if you look at it just very narrowly, the air emissions from a nuclear power plant do not contain carbon dioxide. But if you look at the entire nuclear process, it is not clean. First of all, the mining and processing of uranium leaves tailings, they call it, and toxic pollutants, which no one really knows what to do with, and that certainly is not clean. And then, during the operation of a nuclear plant, the plant will emit pollutants, and pollutants can leak from the plant. Most of these are radioactive. Some will be other air pollutants that we see from other plants. Some will be pollution from the diesel generators that may be used to back up the nuclear plant if it shuts down for any reason. And the really troubling pollutant from nuclear power during its operation is tritium. That's a highly radioactive material that leaks into the groundwater or falls to the ground and surface water from the air. So even though there is no carbon dioxide from the air emissions from the stacks on the plant, there is tritium, and that goes up into the atmosphere and comes back down through precipitation. You may have heard years ago about acid rain. That's what was happening there, that pollutants from industrial plants would be emitted into the air and attached to precipitation that was coming back down from the atmosphere and would leave pollution on the ground or particularly in surface water. So that's what happens with the tritium. And we really haven't done a good study of how much tritium there is, whether it's being impacted or whether it impacts the ground or surface water. And without that kind of a study, we're really playing with an unknown danger there. Finally, the most significant environmental problem that makes nuclear power not clean is the thousands of tons of highly radioactive waste. After the fuel in a nuclear plant is burned and is disposed of, it's still highly radioactive. And if, first of all, it's put into water-filled pools at the plant, what's it called, cooling pools, and they're in those pools for several years, and then they're transferred to canisters, what we call dry storage. And then the problem is, what do you do with it? Right now, the radioactive waste is stored in these canisters at the site of the nuclear plant. And these storage canisters are pretty much out in the open, subject to whatever might come along. And there has been, for years, an effort to find a permanent repository, they call it, underground, supposedly in an area that is so safe that the waste can be stored there for thousands and thousands of years. So far, we haven't found that site. And so over the past few years, there's been an effort to develop what they call interim storage facilities. Interim meaning hundreds of years, perhaps. Or if there's never a permanent repository, it would be permanent. And there have been two proposals, one in New Mexico and one in Texas, for these so-called interim storage facilities. Those have not been developed. Both states, New Mexico and Texas, have prevented those from being developed so far. So the waste remains on site, and the The waste remains radioactive for thousands of years. In fact, one federal court described it as the waste being radioactive for periods of time seemingly beyond human comprehension. And so that's a real problem. And NextEra has not really answered how they're going to address that problem. So let's go to the next slide. It's also important, I think, to look at the environmental impacts of the Google data centers, because that's an integral part of the entire plan. And certainly the Utilities Commission will have to look at that aspect of the plan. They can't just look at the Duane Arnold itself. They have to look at the entire proposal. The data centers require a significant amount of water. All of these the computers that are in these data centers create a lot of heat. And so most of the data centers use water to cool the computers and address all of the heat that is in these buildings. Google is expected to pull water from an underground aquifer of its own. Well, it isn't its aquifer, but it's going to have its own withdrawal system, or from the city of Palo, which also gets its water from the aquifer. We haven't been able to determine yet exactly how Google expects to obtain its water, but either way, it's going to have a big impact on the aquifer. And at this point, we're really concerned about the status of Iowa's aquifers, not just because of Duane Arnold or these Google data centers, but data centers all around the state, and even other large water users. We first looked at this because the carbon dioxide pipelines we've been fighting for the past 5 years now I use a lot of water also. And so it's really been a concern that we don't know the status of Iowa's aquifers. So that's something that the Utility Commission will have to also address. And finally, with respect to the legislative intent to encourage renewable energy, it's especially troubling that NextEra had proposed a number of solar energy projects around the area near Duane Arnold. They've developed one of those, but now that they propose to restart Duane Arnold, NextEra is abandoning 3 of those solar energy projects in order to transfer its interconnection tariff from those projects to the restart of Duane Arnold. So that's directly contrary to the legislative intent to encourage renewable energy. And that's really been a kick in the teeth to the effort in Iowa to be a leader in renewable energy, which we have been. And this is just taking us backward. So let's go to the next slide. So at this point, NextEra has filed its application for a permit with the Utilities Commission. And over the next several months, the Iowa chapter and other entities will petition to intervene in this proceeding and present evidence as to why NextEra should or should not receive a permit. I expect there may be entities that will support NextEra in this proposal. There's there's a feeling that this will promote economic development and jobs. Um, and although, certainly those are um, can be beneficial um, aspects, we don't think that this particular proposal, the way it's been um, uh, put forth, is really the type of economic development we want, nor the type of jobs that we want. It's really unfortunate. We see this time and time again in environmental cases that um, the the proponents of a a, uh, a project that we think has adverse environmental consequences always promotes it as a jobs promoting project. Well, it seems to me as a society, we can create good jobs that benefit the public good. And that's what we need to really focus on rather than just letting corporate America dictate to us what kind of jobs we're going to have. Um, so anyway, all of those things will take place. We will have witnesses to address all of these issues that I've discussed. Um, the commission will then conduct an evidentiary hearing, taking all kinds of evidence, the witness testimony, documents, um, other evidence, and will eventually issue a decision. But this is going to be several months, at least, down the road. Um, so we will keep you posted as things progress. Um, and we probably should have put a link here, but you can make the comments to the utility commission. Um, if we can figure out a way, we'll try to get. Well, there will be an article in the upcoming a chapter newsletter that's going to go out in the next few days, and we will put a link in there as to how you can send comments to the utility commission expressing your concerns about this proposal and asking the commission to deny the permit and look at other ways to uh, provide the energy that we need in a way that does not impact the environment. So with that, I'll take any questions if there are any.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Wally. I will say we had two questions. One was about jobs and the other was the action item, and you answered them both right here at the end. So, good job. Thank you for that. And I will share that link in the comments for us so that everybody can get it with this live video. But yeah, if you have questions, feel free to email us. Otherwise, wait for our newsletter in the next couple days to get a little bit more information. And thank you so much again, Wally. This was an awesome presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
All right.